Okay, thanks everyone for coming. George, do you want to do the intro?
Sorry, Travis.
I've taken off, run my way away. But if George, you'd like to introduce yourself first as well, please.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. What a squeeze. But we're all here, so thanks so much for coming along. It's very special to see you all. So thank you and welcome to tonight's event. I'm just going to give you a brief intro in some of the speakers. So first and foremost, probably, Mark Crystal, novelist, screenwriter, filmmaker and journalist. Mark Crystal has also written, co-authored or contributed to more than 40 art, architecture and design books. His recent A Decade in the Making is Pauline Boty, British art's soul sister, the first and definitive biography of the artist. It was published in October and selected by the Times of London as one of the best art books of 2023. Hurrah! Big round of applause for Mark. Thank you for joining us, Mark, and for everything. Kat Main. Kat Main is a London-based composer. Thank you, Kat. Writer and filmmaker. Kat's work focuses on bringing to light untold stories of trailblazing women who challenged convention and paved the way for future generations, illuminating their lives and legacies with the relevance and recognition that they deserve. The upcoming short film about Nell Dunn and Pauline Boty uses the transcript of the conversation between Dunn and Boty in Dunn's book, Talking to Women, that was written in 1965. And Kat is the producer of this film. Charles Mapleston and Libby Horner at the end there. So Charles is an independent filmmaker. He spent the 1960s at the BBC, initially in radio as a sound engineer, where he worked briefly with Pauline Boty on The Public Ear, and then later in film, where he worked with Ken Russell. Charles left the BBC in 1970 and after a spell working freelance set up his production company Malachite Limited, which went on to produce many one-off and series for Channel 4, such as Looking into Paintings, made in collaboration with the Open University, and the BBC, such as Dressing Up for the Carnival on Canadian writer Carol Shields, which is currently on BBC iPlayer. You can watch it there. He now mostly works with art historian Libby Horner. Together they've made films on John Piper, Patrick Rentians, Frank Brangwen, Faye Goodwin, and currently Pauline Boty. The film is Pauline Boty, Colour Me Gone. Libby Horner at the end there, art historian, researcher, writer, curator, lecturer, and designer, has worked on numerous Malachite films. Major exhibitions have included Frank Brangwen, Leeds, Bruges, Swansea, and the show of Frank's work also at the Tokyo National Museum of Western Art, presented with award for Best Researched Exhibition by Western Arts Foundation, Japan. We're nearly done, I promise. Sorry, thanks for your patience. Oh, there's a delay. Oh, right. Oh, sorry. Okay, God, I didn't realise. Okay, so, and last but certainly not least, Vinny and, of course, Lee Cogswell. Writer, filmmaker Vinny Rawding and director, filmmaker Lee Cogswell are part of a creative team at Mono Media and Channel X, who have produced wonderful documentary films on Peter Blake, The Style Council, Tubby Hayes, and many more over the last decade. They've spent the last 5 years diligently piecing together the story of Pauline Boty's life and times and bringing the first ever film on this pop artist pioneer to life on the big screen. And finally, described by The Guardian as the one of the country's finest pop culture historians, ladies and gentlemen, Travis Elborough, who will be moderating for tonight.
Exactly.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you. My pleasure. And we've got a kind of a brisk programme of events. Boy. There's a comment to be made about the Royal Albert Hall, that it was so good because you heard everything twice due to the echoes from the domes. But we're going to start, I think, with Mark Crystal, esteemed biographer of Pauline Boty, It's going to read a piece about Pauline's work on screen and on stage. Paraphrasing, that's roughly what it is.
That sounds
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
The Internet Movie Database lists 11 credits for Pauline Boty as actress, all but one on television. They begin in 1962 with an episode of Armchair Theater and conclude with her sole big screen appearance 4 years later as an amusing silent bit as the manageress of a dry cleaner opposite Mike O'Kane in Alfie. She also appeared twice on the professional stage, one time at the Royal Court in a production for which she designed the program cover. And she famously played herself, as you saw, in Ken Russell's documentary Pop Goes the Easel. It's not a bad resume, but the acting for which she is known is not what Pauline Boty did best. For that, we turn to an encounter with Charles Carey, who joins us tonight, her Wimbledon School of Art tutor shortly before her death. I happened to be walking down Bond Street, Carey recalled, and I bumped into her and she said, "I'm going to show you how to be rich." We wandered into a shop and she started looking at things. She had the whole shop serving her as though she was very rich, clothes littered everywhere. And then she said, "I don't think there's anything in here for us, Charles." And she marched out. That is the kind of turn at which Boty excelled. Impromptu and improvisational, a dig at the establishment, both witty and unsparing, delivered by the beautiful, commanding character of herself. "We were coming out of the 50s, said her friend Nell Dunn, and all of that stiffness had to be hacked away. But Boty was a good hacker. Boty developed her hacking skills at the Royal College of Art beginning in 1958 in the school's end-of-term theatrical reviews. They were anarchic evenings of loosely structured, often heavily ad-libbed sketches in which everyone was invited to contribute ideas and participate. The reviews were overseen by Roddy Maud Roxby, who'd taken charge of the college theater company. Boty was one of his core group, and she used her appearances not only to enjoy the pleasures of performance and all the attention she got, but to send a message. Pauline was extremely attractive, and that quality she just easily brought on stage, Maud Roxby said. She was flirtatious. She'd come toward the audience. Pauline sang the line, "Daddy wouldn't buy me a Bauhaus." I can remember her singing, "I've got a little cat and I'm very fond of that, but I'd rather have a Bauhaus house." The second time, when she was doing it the second time, she said, "I've got a little cat, my pussy," and everyone went crazy. Nicholas Garland, one of her boyfriends, perceived her intentions. She was being a dumb blonde while she sang it, and I thought, there's something interesting about this, her mocking that male gaze look at her beauty. She knew how people thought she was. She defended against it by producing a parody of that behavior. I thought, you're better than the people who are saying you're a dumb blonde. You're demonstrating that you're not. Her classmate Gerald Nason remembered another song. It was very short, he said. "Everybody loves my body, but my body is just a body to me." On a broadcast of the Public Ear, the BBC radio program on which she appeared, Boty offered her perspective on the idea of fandom. Everyone has dreams and fantasies and other lives going for them, and one of the concrete aspects of this is revealed in our idols, she said. Our fears, hopes, frustrations, and dreams. We can pin them on a star who shows them to millions, and if you can do that, you're no longer alone. In her meta-glam turns in the reviews, Boty offered her own version of this with a notable feminist twist, showing her fans of both sexes that there was more to her, to any woman, than met or didn't meet the eye. Whether or not this sort of performance art was what Boty actually wanted to do, the work she ended up pursuing was more conventional, which isn't really a surprise. Boty loved the cinema, as exemplified by the French and Italian films she saw at the Royal College Film Society. But she also loved the movies, westerns, sci-fi, even Hollywood musicals. Some of her early canvases, in fact, were inspired by pre-war production design and choreography. You can see one at the top of the stairs. She was attracted as well by the communal aspect of acting. To Nell Dunn, she said, "Painting you do alone, but acting you're part of a team. The part is something to do with your own idea, obviously, but it's a part of a something instead of being a thing alone in itself." Boty got her chance to be part of the something from the television director Philip Saville, whom she met on New Year's Eve 1962, and with whom she began an intense affair. Saville cast her in her first role as the Irish tart, Anna, in the armchair theater drama North City Traffic Straight Ahead. "I encouraged her to be an actress," Saville said. "She looked great and she had an aura. At the time, I thought all the best people gave off an aura. Of course, when a man falls for somebody, the aura appears. She was always very surprised that I had such a high opinion of what she was doing because she never valued her acting." Given Saville's observation, one wonders what to Boty acting was meant to mean. Her sister-in-law Bridget felt she did it for money, for which she was always desperate. Acting also raised her profile. She got a lot of press, which enabled her to promote her painting. It might also have been research. When she ran into Charles Carey on the street that time, Boty said that she wanted to make films. Whatever the motivation, in the view of friends, critics, and collaborators, Boty's self-assessment was accurate. She lacked the craft and the commitment to replicate dramatically that which made her so naturally sensational. "When it was good fun," said her college friend Jeff Reeve, referring to the reviews, "that's how it should have been. When it started to get serious, then it didn't work." Keith Johnstone, director of the Royal Court production Day of the Prince, in which Boty appeared, said, "She was so full of life, her skin could barely contain her. Even so, she read well at the audition, but it emerged later on that she was not gifted in movement," he said. "Hard work would have improved this, but it was probably a brain thing, and anyway, she had other fish to fry. Consequently, according to Peter Blake, she could never quite hide herself. I could see why Julie Christie got the parts, and she didn't." Blake's comment refers to Boty's central disappointment. She screen tested with Tom Courtney for the part of Liz, the free-spirited young woman in John Schlesinger's 1963 film Billy Liar, the role that made a star of Julie Christie. Permit me to turn the page properly. Permit me to correct the record. Though it's assumed that Boty just missed getting the part. In fact, neither one of them was cast. The role went to a now-forgotten actress named Topsy Jane. Weeks into shooting, Jane suffered a mental breakdown, and that's when Christie was tapped. In those of Boty's films that still exist, we see a competent player, better in some parts than others. There is, however, one in which she does indeed stand out, and we just saw it. Pop Goes the Easel is about a day in the life of four pop artists, the others being Derek Bosher, Peter Phillips, and Peter Blake. Ken Russell thought of it as a pop art film and included some unconventional set pieces, including a dream sequence in which Boty is pursued by an authority figure in dark glasses and a wheelchair. But it's the penultimate scene, a raucous, well-lubricated dance party filmed at the artist Richard Smith's studio, that Boty, being nothing more or less than her astonishing self, truly stops the show. We see her twisting solo with a feathered boa and shaking boobs and booty top speed in front of a severely overmatched Derek Bosher. But it is the second sighting that stands out. Sensing the camera, she turns to it and winks 3 times, signaling innocent fun, the purple promise of sin, and a slight surprising dash of detachment, a mix that seems to capture Pauline Boty in total. "I was 13 growing up in the Midlands," remembered David Allen Mellor, the art historian who launched Boty's rediscovery. "And by chance I saw this documentary. And here was this vision of something wonderful, of freedom and gaiety. Pauline was part of that revelation, the golden goddess. She is far more than the paintings," he said. She is the harbinger of a cultural revolution and a great liberation. She is the shape of English women to come. In her last years, the drug of regular TV gigs, by distracting her from her true work, became a factor in Boty's deepening despair. In September '64, she gave the painting Epitaph to Something's Gotta Give to the filmmaker Joe Masso by way of apology for having withdrawn from a commercial he planned to direct. "I'm sorry to have let you down," she wrote to him. "You see, these last 14 months, I feel I've got so far away from my painting, and I seem to be getting more and more miserable. I have to find out if not painting is the cause of my depressions." It was a good instinct, and yet, this evening is called from canvas to screen, but I'd like, if I may, to suggest the opposite, that what Boty discovered about herself pursuing an acting career helped unlock her potential as a painter. In Nell Dunn's book, Talking to Women, she asks Boty about acting's appeal. "Pauline, I think it's nice seeing yourself being somebody else, which isn't quite you, but is all based on you, because it's always based on you in acting, I think. But you've assumed another identity in a way, so that you can show yourself much more, because you're not being yourself. You're saying, well, really, I'm supposed to be Anne Smith or something, and so you can really be much more yourself. No, you mean that it isn't really an escape from yourself? It's giving yourself another dimension? Pauline, well, I think it can be a release." From 1959, with Boty's turns in the college reviews, through Ken Russell's Drunken Twist Party in '62, Pauline the performer showed an ability to enjoy and exploit the 1-2 punch of her looks and persona, to understand the way she was perceived and transform those perceptions into what we would call teachable moments that upended conventional notions of what a woman could do and what she could be. But though her stained glass collages and paintings were personal, at the end of '62, she had yet to use the figure of Pauline Boty, so effectively deployed in life, to achieve an artistic transformation. Acting, we may posit, changed that. As she explained to Dunn, the assumption of a fictional identity enabled Boty to release aspects of herself that might otherwise have lain dormant. This was a revelation, and from there it was a short leap to an understanding more transformative, that playing the character of yourself can deliver no less of a release. For Boty, it opened the way to a more comprehensive self-expression, the outcome of which surrounds us on these walls. At Wimbledon, Charles Carey observed, Boty was more interested in making ideas than making art. Starting with 1962's With Love to Jean-Paul Belmondo, as she increasingly set the character of herself at the center of her pictures, Pauline Boty began to make both. In so doing, she found her style.
And it seems fitting in a way that by way of segue, we're going to be looking at a clip from Nell and Pauline, which is the short film that Cat Main has produced, but directed by the esteemed directors Zoe Ford Bennett and starring Hannah Morris as Pauline, based on the dialogues that appear in Nell Dunn's Talking to Women. So we're going to have a quick look at that, and then Kat and I will have a chat about that.
Are you still bound by the conventions you were brought up in, or have you a sort of code of your own?
Well, there are certain conventions, but of course I'm not bound by, that my father tried to vaguely impose because he had a lot of Victorian ideas. He didn't even want me to go to work when I left school, but when I was 11, my mother got TB, and the whole family became chaotic. I was expected to be mum immediately and take over and cook and do stupid things. So I haven't had a particularly conventional sort of life. Although my parents are fairly conventional. I mean, compared with my brothers, my life became unconventional much earlier than theirs.
I think I mean perhaps the kind of world that you and I move in, the sort of art world, say, for want of a better name. I suddenly feel that complete lack of security because I don't know how I'm meant to behave in any given situation.
You see, we're thrown into many different situations, and we have to sort of learn how to behave. We aren't given any particular milieu. But I suppose the sort of thing that you're saying is that one is trying not to be hypocritical about one's reactions to people. And yet, in social circumstances, you smile and shake hands with a person you hate the guts of and things like that. And that obviously creates a sort of conflict because you're always trying to think, well, I must behave as honestly as I can.
If you think you should react instinctively, why shouldn't one go and kick someone's teeth in, you know? Is that wrong, to go and kick someone's teeth in because they've been out with one's husband, say, or is it right? Because that's what I would feel like doing.
I don't know. You'd obviously hesitate because you wouldn't like your own teeth kicked in.
Yes. That hadn't occurred to me.
Well, I like chaos in a way.
You like chaos? Have you ever felt jealous?
Yes, I have. But only in terms of, like, if someone's asked me out or something and they spend all their time looking at other girls, I kind of feel, and I don't care how often you look at pretty girls when you're not with me, but when you're with me, you might at least stop doing that, you know? If I looked at other blokes all the time, you wouldn't half be sick.
But you've never had that sort of painful, agonising jealousy where one wants to jump out of the window kind of thing?
Not really. I don't think so. I suppose, again, it's got to do with possessions again. I don't feel particularly possessive.
Possessive about your men?
No. I feel, well, if they really want to go off, it's the best thing.
Do you think marriage is out of date?
Well, yes. I was rather surprised when I did it. But you see, one is still so motivated so much by so many sorts of funny things. Also, I thought that if I got married, well, one thinks of difficulties of having children without being married.
Would you like to have some children, eventually?
I suppose so, eventually.
But you don't feel the urge now? It interests me because I've wanted to have children since I was about 14.
Really?
Yes. I found this art business just got in my way. It just seems to sort of occur.
I used to vaguely feel that there was something wrong with me, because other girls were feeling much more maternal than I was. But in a way, I like to find that I don't feel particularly maternal.
It's very good, because it leaves you so much freer. Because this awful feeling clamps one down all the time. One wants babies and then one's got them.
I've never really had that, you see. And so it hasn't really ever been a sort of problem for me. I've never had the feeling of wanting babies.
I wonder if it might suddenly come.
It might.
It might never come.
Well, I like children, you know. But I don't know the sort of feeling that you're describing at all.
You don't feel any pressure put upon you?
Not really. At one time I used to get fed up when I went home. This wasn't when I was married or anything, and my father would be playing with his grandson or something. And every time I held it, he'd say, "That's what I want to see." I'd think, "You silly old fool." I used to drop it like a hot brick.
So Helena Wilson there as Nell Dunn as well, with Hannah playing Boty. Now, I know that both Zoe, the director, and Hannah had worked together previously, but also seem to have both been reading the Nell Dunn book around the same time. But also Hannah mentioned, in an interview with her, that she had also come across Boty after reading Ali Smith's novel Autumn. What about you, Kat? What was your first... were you aware of Boty as an artist, or was it through their conversation really about this book? Yeah.
So, interestingly, I had come across Pauline, but I didn't know I had come across Pauline. because I am a little bit of a fan of Marilyn, and I had come across Colour Her Gone quite a few years before and fell in love with it as a piece, but hadn't quite made the link in my mind as to Pauline. I'd not heard of her at the time, so just kind of was banked. But then when, as you said, Hannah and Zoe both quite serendipitously came across talking to women at the same time and were having conversations about it and about potentially wanting to create something based out of it. So Zoe, being the dutiful friend, sent me a WhatsApp message with a World of Books link and said, buy this. So I bought it and dutifully read it and was quite hooked from the Pauline is the first chapter in the book, and I didn't get much past that before getting my phone out and just Googling away. It was lockdown, so there wasn't much else to do, but yeah, so that was how I came into involvement.
And obviously you all three of you have background in theatre, and in Zoe's working with Sam Mendes at the moment, doing the Hills of California, and also worked on the Motive and the Cue, which also strikes me as another sort of double header of two famous people, Richard Burton and John Gielgud, doing Hamlet. But when you said they got in touch with the idea of doing a piece, was it always going to be a film, or I could always see it being something more theatrical?
I think it had a number of lives before its current life. We had previously, as a group, discussed over a glass of wine, as you do, wouldn't it be nice if we could do a short film together? And I think, having explored the themes of the piece, it felt very intimate. The way that it's written, the dialogue, it's an intimate thing, and we thought that potentially film would be a good medium to portray that rather than theatre, where it's slightly more difficult to get that across in a lot of ways. We also, Zoe and myself, Hannah had worked in film before as an actress. Zoe and myself hadn't, and it felt like an interesting challenge to, maybe we could make something and just see what happens. So it was kind of an experiment, really. Yeah.
And do you think, it sounds really a cliche thing to say, but anyway, but did lockdown, I'm struck by, emerging out of lockdown, there's that sense of limitation of time. And one of course, the tragedies of Pauline Boty is that she was so short-lived. And I wonder if it's just that slightly seizing the moment element, which also would inspire you to launch forth with a project of this type.
Yes, definitely. And I think there was time for many people in lockdown to start thinking about other projects, particularly those of us who work in creative industries. A lot of that work was completely stopped. So it felt like a really good time to grab onto something and to run with it and see what happened. And we were really fortunate to be able to do the filming in this early summer of 2021. So we were still under restriction, but we weren't quite as limited. So that in itself was an interesting learning curve, because filming under restriction is very different to filming in kind of the real world as well.
And what do you think I'm struck obviously that Hannah is in Call the Midwife, which is set in the same period that Boty herself emerged from. What is it about Boty, do you think, which would makes it a resonant thing now in 2024 as a drama, actually, as a story of two women?
I think when we all came across the piece, the thing that caught us the most about it is that these are discussions that we have. These are discussions that we, as women in the 2020s, sit down and talk to our friends about. We are frank about sex. We are frank about our party habits and whatever that is. But it almost kind of struck us as odd, in a way, that this was somebody many, many years before our time who was the same. We all felt a kind of kinship with her.
It is very frank
well. It is. She does not hold back, and it's fascinating because you get such a good insight to her as a person through her honesty, and the fact that she's having a conversation with her friend as well, that makes it really interesting. And I think we all took that and thought, this needs to be shared, because not only is her and her life something that people need to know about more widely than they currently do, but also, regardless of whether or not you know anything about her or you've even seen a piece of her artwork, it's a really interesting discussion from the point of view of a woman who is brash and out there and sexual and comfortable with herself in a way that we now want to be. Well, I suppose women have always wanted to be pushing for that kind of way of being, but it feels very much that now it's something that a lot of younger women would really benefit from seeing. This, we're not new. This has been happening before, and I've got 2 young daughters myself, and I remember thinking when I was reading it, I really hope that they grow up in a world where it's okay to be yourself rather than to have to conform to what society thinks you should be for whatever reason that is.
Yeah, I mean, we get a little bit in the exchange there, don't they, with the idea of the Victorian father setting certain rules. No, I mean, I think it's a great project, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it in its completion.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Kat. I think it's probably more with the screening, isn't it? Next up, sorry, I'm fielding questions from either side here. So, next up, we have a short extract from Charles Mapleston and Libby's documentary in progress about Pauline Boty called Colour Me Gone. I think that's right, isn't it? We've got a short snippet of that, and then Charles and Libby
I think there are 2 snippets.
All right, 2 snippets then.
They were meant to be separate, but they're together. One is just an introduction to Wolverhampton Gallery show with Sue Tate.
Right.
And then the clip that we're really presenting here, which is David Mellor.
Fantastic. And David Mellor has already been mentioned, fabulous art historian who staged this extraordinary show called The 60s Art Scene in London at the Barbican in 1993, over 30 years ago. But one of the key moments in the rediscovery of Boty and placing her within the context of her contemporaries.
Wolverhampton Art Gallery decided to do a retrospective of Pauline Boty's work, the first retrospective ever in a public gallery, which I co-curated and gathered up work from a range of public and private collections. Pauline Boty, pop artist and woman. It then toured to Pallant House, where it got a lot of media attention, full-page articles in the big broadsheets, Financial Times, The Telegraph, The Independent. So really bringing her name forward to a much wider audience. So it is rather a fabulous story of disappearance and then triumphant return, if you like, yeah? Almost no books on pop that have been published since 1998 that don't include Pauline Boty, because there is a recognition that she brings something that wasn't there before, that was missing. She also, of course, ticks the equal opportunities box. Look, we have got a woman. So there is a little bit of tokenism going on, I think.
So,
if we're going to talk, would it be good to shuffle around?
Maybe let's have some musical chairs for a bit of variety. No, that's fine. That's right. That'll be okay.
Exactly, you're all speaking.
Exactly. Now, Charles, I think we have to start with something with you, really, which is you are the sole member of the panel who at least, if not knew, certainly encountered Pauline back in the day.
Yes,
and you worked on the Public Ear radio program.
Yes, a charming man I've never met before, upstairs when we were getting ready, came up to me and said, "You look like the only person here old enough to have known Pauline." So I thought, oh, God. Anyway, I spent the 60s working for the BBC, which was absolutely amazing because I was able to move departments and met all sorts of astonishing people, including Pauline. I was trained as a sound radio engineer, and she worked on a programme called The Public Ear, which had a very brief life, only about 6 episodes. But they interviewed all sorts of cultural figures, important people, I mean, the Stones and the Beatles and Kenneth Tynan and so on. I was assigned to their studio where they interviewed people, and I just recorded them and cut up tapes and so on. And so that was it, just about 3 days, which was wonderful. I'd seen Pop Goes the Easel and knew her work. And I was always, thinking we would love to do something about her work. And then when she had the exhibition at Wolverhampton, Libby knew the person running that gallery, so we immediately said, right, we must go and get this going.
Had you thought about her much in casting so much, had you thought about her much in the interim period?
Well, not a lot. I'd bought the book that Sue Tate in her previous name and David Mellor had done. But if you're a documentary filmmaker, you always have a huge number of projects. Vinny will back me on this, that are sort of, at various stages of pre-production, and that was certainly one of them. I make films to share enthusiasms, really.
Yeah. I mean, you've made films about John Piper and Faye Godwin. The unpronounceable B-named people that we've mentioned in the council already. But I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce those names again. But, I mean, for you, Libby, as well, as an art historian, I think, Sue Tate alludes to it there and says there is now no book after 1998, which he's not in. Before about 1993, and Sue Tate's on the desk, and he shows it too, I have that book, the 60s art scene book, beautiful book. Mellor says in that book, that she looked forward in a feminist way to the issues which concerned women's art in the following 2 decades: identity, pleasure, critiques of patriarchy, and the problematic issue of establishing a distinctively female iconographic program. And he's already saying that in 1993. But for you, Libby, as an art historian, was she a missing piece of that puzzle? Or is it someone that you kind of were aware of in the firmament, but just no one had quite switched the bulb on yet?
I must admit, I wasn't aware of her until the Wolverhampton exhibition, really.
Yeah.
But she's portrayed so much as this actress and showgirl and everything else, and I think it's such a shame to concentrate on that, and we should be concentrating on her art, which is all around us now, and that's what she should be known for, really. She was a good artist. She's a very good portrait painter.
Because I know Peter Blake in Mark's book says something along the lines on, she was wasting herself doing the acting and she split herself too thin and so on. And that, I guess there's a school that's all of Pauline, whereas I think you feel that the art is the core.
Yes, I mean, it seems a shame that in some letters she said, "Oh, I don't want to teach art." She seemed to find it beneath her, and she didn't want to do a mural in a hairdresser's place because she felt that was beneath her as well. But the acting seemed to be okay, and presenting herself as a rather glamorous person in front of photographers. But I think really she ought to have just concentrated on her art.
But I'm also struck by the performance element as well, is that she is an activist as well, in terms of she's one of the members of the Anti-Ugly Action Group as well, who are a group who were protesting against what they saw as often retro buildings, actually. A lot of the buildings they're protesting against are neo-Georgian ones. So this idea of being out on the street and performing is part of the milieu at that point of things that the students at the Royal College of Art. So maybe it seemed less of a thing. I suspect probably the reason why she didn't want to teach, because that's the sort of thing that she was groomed for by the Victorian dad, isn't it? That she's, that's the only decent profession you're allowed to do is, a good girl, teach until you get married. Because obviously in the past, women could have to get married or could only teach until they got married, so that all of that.
Yes. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's... So for you, though, what are the key works in the paintings? What for you do you think are the ones that, sort of Mark alludes to the later ones, but I find some of the early ones also quite fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lovely self-portrait, very early self-portrait upstairs, which I find absolutely mesmerising. She's looking out, and even at the other end of the gallery, her eyes seem to just stare
pop
at
out,
you.
don't they? Yeah.
And her sister-in-law said that she felt it showed a certain lack of confidence at that age. I mean, she obviously changed a lot. She had a lot of confidence later. But that is a wonderful work of art. And there's another one of a young girl on the beach there. And I don't know, I was looking at it today. I don't know if this is quite right to say in front of this audience, but there's a little red streak under her bottom. And so I wonder what that portrays. I'd never actually noticed that before. But maybe she's already thinking about the dilemma of being a girl at that stage and, you know, like you say, being expected to get married and do all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with the O for a FUC.
Yes.
dot.
Yeah.
You know, the playfulness in that. I mean, Charles, obviously we're hearing her. I mean, what was she? I mean, I think she was quite a provocative commenter on that program.
Yes, well, I think you can find online some of these monologues of hers. She sounds sort of rather prim in her voice, but she's very provocative in what she says. She does it in a rather nice way. But she was talking in one of the ones that we're planning to use. The sort of a woman's own sort of idea of what a woman should be, and getting married, and you flirt with people, but you never have affairs, and you know, being married is the most wonderful release and satisfaction in life that can possibly come to you. You know, she didn't believe that at all, so that was all complete nonsense, and thought most of the readers didn't believe it either, but they were sort of suckered into it.
Yeah. And when you're making this documentary, I mean, I take it, you know, it's some. I mean, are you involving archive, obviously interviewing people, and so on? Is there a mix of those?
Yes, absolutely.
And is there a difference for you? I mean, you were making films at the BBC in the 60s in real time, quote unquote. How about dealing with someone that's posthumous in a way?
That's always a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I've mostly made films for people who are alive, which is a great deal easier and more fun. So it's a bit of a struggle, frankly. But, you know, one has to go with whatever archive material there is, and then you get involved with all sorts of rights issues. People like Getty and a lot of the photographs of Pauline. I mean, how they get their hands on them, I don't know. So they want £300 for a 5-second screening of one shot, you know. Yeah. So this is a little nightmare that we're looming towards, I fear.
Well, thank you both very much, and it's a lovely clip we saw, or lovely 2 clips in fact and stuff. So, Charles and Libby, thank you very much. And last but in no means least, you've seen them many times. Doing the standing up, sitting down routine, but now you get a chance to see some of the reason why they're sitting here, and also perhaps their keenness for why they don't want to block the screen with their heads, which is because Lee Cogswell and Vinnie Rawding are the makers of Boty, the forgotten artist of this. It's just called The Forgotten Artist, isn't it? We're talking about the working title. I'm sure that they'll explain more. So we're going to watch a short clip of Lee and Vinnie's documentary about Pauline Boty.
You should be talking about Pauline Boty when you talk about pop art. She should always be in the same sentence as Warhol, Blake. You know, she is an absolute innovator.
She was beautiful, she was clever, she was talented. You know, she had a lot going for her.
She was such an incredibly lively, life-affirming figure.
She was kind of delving into life without any fear.
She was wild, exuberant, bohemian, outspoken. She was also genuinely intellectual.
She was a complete package. There wasn't any women who were doing the fun stuff that she was doing. You got serious women artists like Louise Bourgeois, and it was all a bit deadly earnest, and she was having fun like the rest of the pop artists. We were very close friends. We were in a film together that Ken Russell made, and I was in love with her, deeply in love with her.
What's that? That's crazy.
That's just an occasional spaceship flying through the sky, you know. You get them every now and again.
She, you know, wasn't content just to do painting and stained glass. She acted, she wrote, she discussed. she just, I don't know, she's a star.
On the good ship, lollipop, it's a night trip. Into bed you hop and dream away. On the good ship, lollipop.
She was kind of overtly sexy and sexual, and she would have images of bums and maybe less conspicuous female parts suggested. It was quite a feminist thing to do.
I'm through with love, I'll never fall again.
She introduces sexism and feminism into paintings. That's why I wanted to see them so much. I was like, this is a person I wish I knew. This is a person I wish I could go down the pub with.
She was in her time fighting for the future, so consciously aware of women's place in culture and society.
Pauline Boty was way ahead of her times in her grasp of feminist politics, a gendered critique of the world in which she lived.
She became a kind of feminist symbol, an icon.
Pauline was pointing out men's and women's sexuality.
She obviously had the ability to produce art that would be much safer and more saleable, less political, less confrontational. But, you know, she was clearly producing art that really mattered to her in terms of what she wanted to say.
She offers an interesting counterpoint to the sort of male view of pop art and what art should be about.
What's that? That's the finger pointing at you.
The bomb.
That's Beethoven's pen. And there's Franklin D. Roosevelt growing older. They're badges, actually. They were.
Like the fact that you've got someone in the 60s who knew the Rolling Stones, who knew Bob Dylan, like a fundamentally cool person who's also political and willing to speak up. It's just totally unbelievably rare.
She and her work all had so many of the best characteristics of the 1960s. So fun, political, colourful, original, thoughtful, and unfortunately short-lived as well.
Down the valley on the horses they thundered. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ah, but was it them who really blundered? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It was the Manfreds.
She was kind of all the cool things about the 60s that you could never quite catch hold of. She was just there for that brief minute.
I was having a beautiful little life, and I couldn't see it. There was this manageress of a dry cleaner.
She's filmed snogging Michael Caine in Alfie. And then by the end of that year, she was dead.
The announcement that she died was a really big shock.
She may be dead, but the art is still alive and doing what all good art does, make us think about the world both then and now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Come on, everybody, let's twist. Hey, hey, come on, everybody, let's twist.
Well, everybody's doing the twist. Yeah, it goes like this, where you shake that thing, yeah, round and round, and you lift your leg up and down, and you twist around the clock.
Come on, everybody, let's twist. Hey, hey, come on, everybody, let's twist. Hey,
well, there's a crazy little place in this big town where everybody comes around, and they jam the door, and they climb the floor, climb the walls, and they have a ball, and they twist around the clock.
Sorry, I forgot to warn you. My minor appearance in that, so I apologise for that.
We've got a different jacket.
Yeah, exactly. I've changed my jacket this time around. Yeah. Last time we did an event together, I was wearing the same jacket, which is a bit of a no-no sartorially, isn't it? I only got 2 jackets, but at least I can dig out the other one. Now, Vinny and Lee, I mean, you've made films before, and I'm struck that two of the figures you've made films are about are John Simmons, the clothier, the sort of pioneer of the Ivy League style in the UK, and Tubby Hayes, the sax player, who also performs on the soundtrack for Alfie. Now, neither of those figures are exactly household names, but they are figures of the 60s who are slightly neglected but in need of resurrection in some way, or need of greater credit in some way. Is that what appeals to you as Boty, as a subject? Because in the same vein as those figures, that there's something of the cool school about them both as well.
I think making a film about somebody that isn't niche would be too easy. We like a challenge. We like to make films on people that are not necessarily going to get funded. We like a challenge.
Come true.
Yeah.
But I mean, Lee, you're a nipper. So I mean, what's Vinny? I think we're.
It's all my fault.
Yes. But I mean, Vinny, I think we've spoken about this before, but your discovery of Pauline Boty kind of, I think, dates from the 1990s, doesn't it?
Yeah. And discarded art section, took me to the Barbican, to the Mellor show. And it's all before the internet, so you just think to yourself, oh, that's a great story, really intrigued about it, a bit of mystery attached to it. Went and seen the art, really fell in love with the art. Then kind of forgot about her a little bit. Then she used to come up in the pub, and they were making films. I was wanting to do something on it, and Mark said to me, "Let's do something on it."
Yeah,
that was probably about 6 years ago when we first said we were going to do something on it.
And Lee, for you, what was your response? Did it mean anything to you? Did you see the?
I said, "Oh, great! Somebody else I've not heard of."
Someone else you've not heard of.
Well, we'd made a film on Peter Blake a few years earlier, so I'd at that point seen Pop Goes the Easel, so I was aware of her from that. I mean, she just stands out in that, doesn't she? Yeah. So I was aware of it from that, but no, it is, honestly, without joking, it is what I've got used to with monomedia films. Mark, my partner in monomedia films, comes to me with ideas of people that are obscure and that are niche. And but having seen Pop Goes the Easel, it's just a great film. She needs celebrating, that's the point.
But I wonder whether there's the liberty of being younger and not even having thut about it.
I love that you keep going on about how you
We're just feeling particularly elderly today, I don't know. But I mean, I'm kind of intrigued in it, because in a way you're being immersed into this world, which is quite distant. And though I've talked with the other people as well about that, there's definitely some contemporary resonance about Boty at the moment. I mean, this amazing show is on. There's more of a conversation about it. I'm also struck by one of the other interviewees in Nell Dunn's book is Anne Quinn, the novelist who unfortunately sort of committed suicide in Brighton in the 70s. But her novel Berg has been rediscovered, and there's Claire Louise Bennett has written a novel in the same way that Ali Smith wrote a novel incorporating her into it. So these particular women from that period seem to have been rediscovered.
Well, I think there's an art world which we're not part of.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people in the art world knew about Pauline Boty. Do you know what I mean? But we're kind of looking like, well, that's a great story to bring to more people.
Yeah.
I always make the comment that I want somebody to wait Wednesday night in Halifax to switch on Netflix or the BBC and watch this film and go, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, certainly when we did the unveiling of the plaque, there were some young people there, not just Lee. Yeah. So that reach of going out, is that the audience you feel for the film?
It's just trying to pass on. It's a celebration of film. It's not a misery documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. Obviously, the film ends. Well, that clip ends. That's not where the film ends. No. It's a very different matter.
It's an industry trailer. That's
exactly. Working on. So it ends on a slightly tragic note. But I wonder if reviewing the whole of, I mean, Mark's book also has a coda, which is almost even more tragic, but tragic still. Afterlife of Clive Godwin, her husband, and her daughter, Boty Godwin, both of whom met early deaths in quite grim circumstances.
Yeah.
Do you? I mean, maybe this is something for the whole panel, really, in a sense. But do you think it's a tragic story, or is it just one of, in a sense, rather like the Blade Runner thing? She just burns brightly.
No, yeah, I think that narrative of the tragic pop artist that disappeared, and I think that's going away now. And I think I think it's a bit of laziness now attached to that. Our film deals with that obviously because you have to. You deal with Clive's death and things, but at the end, the arc is up into the celebratory, the paintings selling for the interest, the books. We're all swimming in the Boty Mania pond at the moment. Mark's book, our film, Charles and Libby doing stuff and that.
Yeah.
But it definitely ends on a, wow, look at this.
Yeah.
We don't claim to have discovered Pauline Boty.
No.
Do you know what I mean? But we want to raise the profile and for our own benefit as well, to make a good film.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone could claim to discover that she was there.
There's a few, too.
Oh, yeah. We won't name names tonight, anyway. Unless anyone's here who wants to, I don't know. But
I'm Spartacus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where do we think? I mean, I'm struck again this temporality thing. That 1993 was when that great Mellow show was on.
Brilliant, yeah.
That's 30 years ago, which is longer ago than when Pauline. The distance from 93 to when Pauline died in 66 is 27 years. And that's now 31 years from that. Where in 30 years' time do we think the Boty?
Well, there'll probably be about 10 books, 5 films. I don't know, there's so little art comes to market now. I think that's probably going to be the problem for that side of it. Do you mean it'll just go and sell? There's so little stuff left out there. Films and books, I don't know. I think there will be a biopic of some sort in the coming years. I know people are working on things like that. I think that will happen. But for us, I think for me, and for us as people that's making the film, was to put in her name, cementing it into that British pop artist thing. Do you mean? And I know in recent books and times, she's become more than a footnote.
Yeah.
But just to make it solid in there by the medium of film.
Yeah.
Mark's done a book. But there's never been a film done before.
Sure.
So I think that should.
And and I wonder. I mean, this is a random kind of connecting point, really. But is documentary the? I mean, I'm struck by the post office scandal. There have been documentaries about that, but it was only when the drama existed that suddenly it became this massive thing. Would a drama, do you think, take it to that? I mean, obviously, two of you are making, two sets of you are making documentaries, which is But I wonder also for a woman like Pauline who was an actor, and Mark picked up on the comments with Neil Dunn, where at some point she says something along the lines of, paraphrasing what Mark said in his essay, that acting actually allowed her to realise something that was more real about herself than sometimes she could in real life. I mean, these are just I'm just randomly spouting nonsense. I
think that they were all young, so they're trying everything. It'd have been easier for Pauline Boty to stay in Calshotton in suburbia without doing anything, because the father, she come from a quite affluent middle class family. Her father could have looked after that, but she didn't want to do that. Every step of the way she was pushing creativity, maybe Wimbledon, Royal College, and when she comes out of there, and looking back, it looks quite logical. Blake was there, and Hockney was there, and Bosher, and all that. But I think she's quite extraordinary that way, where she pushes, and she'll have a go at most things.
Yeah, I mean, she's studying stained glass at the Royal College of Art as well, isn't she? She's not in the.
We've got some footage of her that Jeff Reeves taken in 1960, and it's out of colour in a cine camera. And she's in there briefly, she's in there with these other guys doing it. And it looks so arduous, task, that stained glass, that creation in there, and there. It's great footage, it's never been seen with stuff like that in the film.
I mean, there's a stained glass piece upstairs.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Really incredible.
It's incredible stuff like that.
Vinny and Lee, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you. We're going to invite Chris and Libby to return to the chairing, if you want to move up one or something. Yeah, that's good. And now it's your chance, audience, to ask a few questions, maybe quite...
If they can, I'll pass
Yeah.
this for the recording.
Okay. So, first question there, is that right? Yeah.
So when they make the inevitable Hollywood biopic of Boty, who would each of the panel's dream casting be?
Very good question. Starting with you, Mark, what was your dream casting?
My dream casting would be an unknown because, you know, when you have Jane Fonda as Martha Washington, or, you know, Tilda Swinton as Queen Elizabeth, you're looking at an actress that you know very well play a character. You would naturally assign the traits of the actress to the character. I think that, you know, Pauline Boty was a one-off. She was a very unusual and original woman. So why create a film where you bring in, where the audience brings in preconceived notions about the person who's playing the part? Of course, you know, everybody says, well, how are we going to raise money on Jane Blow? But the fact is, if I had my druthers, and if anybody has a cocktail napkin and a checkbook, we can make a deal tonight for my book. I think should be somebody that the audience has no expectations of. That's my feeling.
How about you? I know you have a I feel like being disloyal to your star cast.
But to be completely honest with you, if I genuinely believed that there would be someone else who could do it as well as Hannah, I would say. But for me, the process of going through with so Hannah Morris, who played Pauline in our film, the process of seeing her learn about Pauline and become Pauline, she really did embody Pauline, her energy, the kind of her sexual nature in a way, her comfort, and just her vibrancy, I think, would be really difficult to match. I mean, I'd be interested to see other people come through the casting door, but I do think Hannah, for me, really absolutely nailed Pauline.
That's good. Libby, how about you?
I agree with what Mark said, but on the other hand, I was struck how much Hannah looked like Pauline in real life, and twiddling with her hair, and the beautiful sort of poised way she went around the sofa and everything, and then the way she sort of drooled over that table. To me, that was just Pauline. So yeah, Hannah gets my vote as well.
My vote too, Hannah.
You're then, right?
She's both, I mean, relatively unknown and absolutely a cracking audition. I mean, you know, give us a part. All we need is the budget.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Well, Hannah's in our film as well. So she kind of linked some of the interviews, so I kind of hooked up with Hannah when they were and struggling with theirs a little bit, and we were struggling with ours. So, yeah, Hannah for me,
You're doing well.
So I text her.
You love
One for an unknown.
I completely understand the idea of Hannah, but for me, no, it'd be Hannah. She, like Vinny said, she's in our film as well. Yeah, done a bit of work. She should be perfect.
Very good then.
That's that decided.
Well, we just probably by the Did you have anyone in mind, sir? No. I mean, obviously, the danger is with AI now. They're just CGI using like the remaining footage, and it'll just be all done with robots or something. Any other questions?
Where is Hannah? She's currently on stage.
So the lady in the nice beret. Come on, far away.
Thinking about her career in acting or non-career in acting, we haven't said very much about Clive Goodwin, who she married, who was a theatrical agent, a very important one. And I wondered what Mark in particular, or any of the rest of you, thought about what effect, if any, her marriage had on that balance within her career.
Okay, good question. Mark?
Well, that's a very good question. Clive was a television producer and presenter when they met. He wasn't an agent yet. And his agency didn't really take off. Is that Rosemary? Yes. His agency didn't really take off until after she died. He threw himself into that as a way of running away from his grief. I don't know how much he actually had an influence on her as an actress. She was already doing it when they met. I think Philip Saville was probably the person who was more influential in terms of saying, you know, you should be an actress, just because he felt that she had some. That's my thought about it.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Just say that in that clip we showed of David Mellor, he alludes to her being in a very political, because Clive Godwin knew people, sort of Red Dwarf and Tara Daly, and there was a whole lot of people like that who I'm quite sure influenced her work, which was quite powerfully political, actually. Well, there's the burning monks in one of the shots that we've shown, and the American police sort of with arms around people. So she was really getting into that stuff, very 60s politics.
Definitely.
For me, there's I don't know how many of you are familiar with Nell's book, but there's a wonderful chapter in there where Nell's question to her is, I don't really understand the thing about you getting married. And I think Pauline's response to that is really showing of how she has potentially, maybe not changed professionally, but actually personally. She mentions how Clive's actually the first man she's ever met who genuinely takes her seriously as an intellectual, talented human being who seems to like her. He says he likes women. This novel thing where there's a man who actually believes that women are kind of equal in that way. So I think he probably would have had a distinct impact on her personally, which then would have spoken into the rest of her life, I assume. But that always really touched me. I wanted to show that clip today, but I was outvoted. So.
We had no say in the vote. I don't know who was deciding that. So. Any other? Yeah, gentleman here in the tie, and then the woman there in the Tim first, and then we won't do the socialist thing of having 3 questions in a row. We've mentioned Clive Godwin's political activism, but I can't really deal with the tripart system of questions. But fire away.
Okay, Peter Phillips, not that Peter Phillips, and I've noticed early on Peter Blake making the note that he felt she'd wasted a lot of her time and life on the acting, etc. When she could have been painting more. And I would welcome the comments on this because I feel that acting to her was part of her persona. It built her persona. And secondly, that acting and what she did and television and everything and dancing on Ready, Steady, Go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Actually informed her art. And I'd just like to know of any comments on that, as to whether that's what you feel. I think Peter Blake, I understood why he said that, but I still do, I think it was ignorant of the other things that were going on around.
No, I think I would agree with you on that point. But Libby, what do you think?
I get the feeling that her acting was a way of publicising her art, and that it, to my mind, in a way, it was a rather cheap way. If she really was a good artist, she should have just accepted the fact she was a good artist. She didn't need to do all these other things. I think it was more like sort of prostituting her art.
But she also needed the cash.
Yeah, exactly.
Because as a young artist, not spending anything on the painting, she needed the cash.
Yes.
Can I say something about that? You know, when I was working on the book, I watched Ready, Steady, Go, not Ready, Steady, Go, sorry, Pop Goes the Easel many times on a computer. And when I came here and I went downstairs, that was the first time I'd actually seen it on the big screen, as it were. And the thing that struck me the most was how young she was. You know, it is the job of young people to do a lot of different things. And they all, it's like making a reduction. It all comes into the soup at the end. Everything you've done, everything you've tried to do, influences what it is that you become. When you look at somebody who was 28 years old when she died, it's very hard. I disagree with you, Ruby. I don't think it's fair to say she was prostituting her art. She's trying things out. And that's what we all do when we're young. We try things out. And as I said, I feel it influenced her painting because it put her more in touch with who she was as an individual. So, you never know. When I was working on the book, I talked to Jan Haworth, and I said, well, what do you think she would have become? And she said, I look at myself and, I've come so far in life. I never thought I would be the person that I am. We were all chrysalises, and who knows what she would have become. So I think it's when you're a young person trying things out, it's premature to say you shouldn't have done that, you should have done this, especially when you die when you're 28. So.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned is the famous painting Bum, which was part of a stage set for O Calcutta, the kind of Timon thing. But you mentioned in the book that Timon had notes saying, a pop art ballet, with stuff based by Pauline Boty. So there's, the whole multimedia expansion of that time as well, I imagine, would have been something that would have interested Pauline if she'd lived beyond. Certainly by the later 60s. I mean, obviously there's a big Yoko Ono exhibition on at the moment, but this idea of performance as an art form as well growing into something that maybe...
Well, also she had applied for an Arts Council grant to work as a production designer in theater when she got out of college. Yeah. And she did theatrical designs, and when she worked as an actress, she also designed the covers of the programs, and she designed the posters. So she was, very engaged with the idea of communal things. And as she said to Charles Carey the last time he saw her, I want to make movies. And I think that, it's hard to... I love her paintings. I mean, that's why I spent as long time as I did working on a book about her, was because her art spoke to me, her paintings. But, it's a long road that has no turn, as the saying goes. So who knows where that road would have lived.
Would you like to speak?
Yes, okay. I'm probably one of the few people here who actually knew Pauline quite well. And she was, when I was teaching at Wimbledon, she was there the first term I started teaching. I was teaching stained glass then. And so I know all about the beginning of her development. And I last met her by chance in Bond Street when she'd become pregnant. And that was, however many years ago that was, I can't remember. It was many years later that I heard that she died. And so we talked about art, and she said, people call me a pop artist, but the Beatles are pop musicians. I'm a commentator on the pop scene, and sometimes I feel we look a little bit superior looking down. This is what the pop people like. But she said, I'm very interested in working in film, and I'm going to give up painting for a few years and go back to film, where I feel like more really entering a popular medium. And that was her view at that point.
At that time. Thank you, Charles.
But I knew her, I knew her because 67 years ago, she was our babysitter. and I know this because my son was 67 last week. And so my wife then, Jennifer Carey, was a theatre designer and very creative. And she and Pauline used to spend whole evenings working out little scenes and working out, turning clothes that we had into costumes, very simply. And so I sort of, when I was teaching stained glass, I pointed out that medieval stained glass was a popular medium, and everybody understood the iconography of medieval art. And I said, I think it would be nice if you could find a way of doing stained glass that would be equally understandable by people today. And so I gave them projects like design stained glass windows for a nightclub. And so they would have to sort of think, what sort of club is this? And I would say, well, you invent the club and then talk about it when you've done the work, and we'll talk about it then. And so some people said they designed windows for a slightly loose type club where not everybody would approve of. Other people took rather more ordinary public path ideas.
I guess, Charles, I have to ask you, did Pauline go for the loose path or the more conventional in the nightclub version?
Looking at sort of popular culture in that way. But I sort of saw her development and how she started looking at cinema and all those things and how it all developed. But the notion of English pop art was a sort of a little invention, because I was on the committee of the AIA Gallery, which was a little gallery in Soho, and I put on the first exhibition, pop art exhibition, and Pauline and Peter Blake were two of the people represented. And I actually didn't know any other artists who did that sort of work, and I asked around, and nobody else knew any other artists who were doing that sort of work. And it was only when Pauline got to the Royal College and had already met Peter Blake that she came into contact with other artists working somewhat in the same field. But anyway.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. It's fascinating to hear your recollections about Pauline. I just wanted to pick up on a point that Mark made, actually, about whether or not we can quantify the loss of Pauline Boty to the world. And I'm interested to hear what the panellists think about what she might have achieved if she hadn't died so young, what we might be saying about her this evening, and how she might have shaped our world.
Thank you. Yeah. So we'll turn to the youngest person on the panel, Lee, to answer that question first, because
What was the question?
it was what would Pauline have done if she had lived, and and what might what great work might she have gone on to. I think that was roughly it, wasn't it? By paraphrasing.
I think she'd have just carried on. I hope she would have carried on acting. Just to go back to the previous point as well. Yeah. I think she'd have just carried on. I think the fact that she died so young just means there's just a lack of everything from her. Mm-hmm. Had she lived, there'd have been a lot more archive for me to use.
Vinny? Charles?
Well, I'm going to copy something. One of the people in our film is a guy called Ken Baines, who used to be in the stained glass department when Pauline was there, and he was very much a mover and shaker in the anti-ugly brigade, complaining about British architecture. But he hoped she would go on painting, but he thought she might become more of a cultural commentator, probably after your job, Travis.
He's not very well paid, so
he suggested rather in the style of Joan Bakewell, for example. And that because she, as we've said, she moved in all sorts of different circles, knew all sorts of people, and has enthusiasms for lots of things, and could talk very intelligently about them and react to them. So it's a thought.
Well, even thinking of someone like George Melly, slightly, coming from art world and the jazz world, and then becoming this figure voice. There was crossovers within these disciplines at that time. How about you, Livy? What do you think?
Well, when I think what I was doing at 28, and when any of you think what you were doing at the age of 28, I was living in Saudi, and I would have no idea that I would end up writing all these books and making films. So God only knows.
Yeah.
Would there have been room for Peter Blake had she lived?
Well, that's the question. Kat, what do you reckon?
I agree. I think with Livy, I think it's very difficult to make assumptions about a free spirit. I think I hope she would have continued to have flown in the direction that felt right at the time, and that could have been more of the same. It could have been some complete curveball. She could have gone into politics. There's so many things that she would have been capable of doing because of her intelligence and her charisma and her talent, and I hope that she would have had a really varied and long career.
Mark, I'm going to throw a slight thought to you about this question, which is in terms that both Dozier and Phillips, who are in Pop Goes the Easel and Hockney, and also Clive Godwin afterwards, all went to America. Do you see Pauline Boty making that? Because there's definitely this moment in where the 60s come to an end, and there's a cultural gravitational shift at the fag end to the States, and suddenly LA and stuff is where it's all happening, and the power swifts back to American and the kind of cultural pendulum. Do you see Pauline making that transatlantic journey? I mean, she talks about America a bit in the Nell Dunn interview. But...
Well, that's an interesting question. She, Adam Smith, who unfortunately died very young and was actually Pauline Boty's first biographer, noted that she went to America in 1954 on the Queen Mary as a teenager before she started middle school. And he said that made her the first British pop artist to visit America. But the fact is, if you look at a lot of her work is very anti-American. Countdown to Violence, one of her paintings, is a very, it's not only is it an anti-American imperialist and violence and a critique of American culture, it also ties the whole idea of American violence to the destruction of female pleasure, which I think is quite interesting. It's a very interesting painting. So I'm sure that Pauline Boty would have gone to America if she wanted to. But I don't I can't imagine, I mean, who knows? But I cannot imagine Pauline Boty going Hollywood. I just don't see it.
Even in the acting, I mean, obviously Julie Christie goes and is in, you know, Shampoo and things like that. There are a few, and then people come back, you know.
That's true. They go to America and then they come back.
And moan about it. Moan about how terrible it is over there and stuff.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. If undoubtedly, Pauline Boty, who was somebody who said, you know, why not?
Yeah.
If somebody had offered her something, she would have gone to see what it was like. I mean, I can't imagine that she would have rejected an experience. I mean, of all the things that you can say about Pauline Boty and all the speculation you can do, the idea that she would have said, oh no, that's not for me, is hard to conceive of. So, yeah, I mean, she would have been thanking the Academy.
We have one final question from this lady here.
It's Libby, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. For Libby, I think I feel aligned with your sort of critical thinking approach to Pauline, and that perhaps in her persona she was fairly conventionally unconventional, and that the point perhaps that you're making is that her true sort of creativity was actually in her artwork rather than in her performance of herself. And I'm interested to know what you think is the actual value in her artwork that might be relevant for us now.
Well, like David Mellor said, I love her use of colour. I mean, that close-up we did of Monica Vitti with the green and the red, and you know, when you're at school and you do art lessons, you're always told you mustn't use those two colours together. It's absolutely wonderful. It's mind-blowing.
It's upstairs, actually.
Yes, it's terrific. So I love her use of colour. I love her portraits. I think it's almost a shame that she felt she had to go down this route of pop art around the edge of it, like, Big Bill Colosimo. You know, it's a good portrait, but why did she feel she had to do this? She was following a trend, I suppose, and like Mark said, she was very young, so she did what a lot of other people were doing. So how she developed that, I don't really know, although she did go into the very sort of political art, which is relevant nowadays, especially nowadays.
I think that's the key point, isn't it, really, that she is both kind of the pop hedonism thing, but also the seriousness.
Well, she was going into far more serious art, yes.
Can I say something? Of course. About this painting in particular. I understand what you're saying, but the thing about Big Jim Colosimo was that he was an American gangster.
Yeah.
And he was famous as he was a very successful pimp. And if you look at this painting, she's painted him with those Peter Blake chevrons at the top and the bottom. So she's presented him as a kind of pop star. And to me, it's a political statement. It's in America, it's the pimp who's pop.
Okay, yeah, I like it.
I don't think it was just I have to do this because we have to do it. I think she had a point to make.
Can I tell you a quick funny story about this picture? Because
Yes.
her sister-in-law, Bridget Boty, never liked this painting, but apparently they wanted to exhibit in the States, and she let it go around the States for about 18 months. And it came back, and I think she was now the owner, because I think Pauline's daughter had died. And it came back, and she said, I don't like this thing in the house. And they were thinking about getting solar panels for the roof, and the price of selling this painting was about the same as a solar panel. So she said, Big Jim went out and the solar panels came in.
Well, yeah, I won't welcome of pimping your house, I guess.
Pimp my house.
Exactly. I think that we're probably out of time now. But thank you all for coming, and thank you, Lee, Vinny, Christopher,
Charles.
Libby, Charles even, sorry, God blimey, Charles, Libby, Kat, and Mark for coming. I think the exhibition is open for a little bit longer, short time to quickly glance at stuff. But thank you all for coming.
And thank you, Trev.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone.